The Earth has been stripped of up to 90% of its species in 5 waves of mass extinction over the past 450 million years, and scientists now believe that the 6th wave is underway, but this time we cannot blame a rogue asteroid. In our Science Slot this week, we're looking at mass extinctions throughout history, from the dinosaur to the dodo. Well, that was a one-off, I suppose. We'll be finding out which species are currently under threat of being wiped out forever, and most important, we'll be looking at why is this happening. Joining me, Luke O'Neill, Professor of Biochemistry and Director of the Trinity Biomedical Sciences Institute at TCD. Luke, good morning.
Morning,
Still is morning, not quite 12. Did you have a good holiday?
I did, indeed. Back with a vengeance.
Back with a vengeance.
And I even enjoyed Cork. In the studio down there is very posh, Pat, so that was great.
It's a posh telephone box.
It is.
Yes, it is. I presume you escaped from Cork before the defeat.
I did, absolutely, just in case. I was lucky.
Now, give us an overview of the 5 great extinctions and what may have caused them.
We're lucky to be here, Pat, basically. There's been massive extinctions through history since life emerges on Earth. There's waves of them, basically, And it can be a thing like an asteroid crashing into Earth and causing mayhem. It can be environmental changes, like the climate change, of course, through history would have happened as well, that wipes out certain species. But there's about 5 big ones, basically. The biggest was 99% of life became extinct.
When was that?
And that was about 2 billion years ago, not a long time ago. And that happened because oxygen began to increase in the atmosphere because plants evolved.
Yeah.
And oxygen's quite toxic, strangely. It rusts things, And much life couldn't handle the oxygen and just got wiped out. We survived because some of the life could handle oxygen and we're descended from them, So for various reasons, life has become extinct through history.
So we are descended from the 1% who were left.
We are. And here's a great one, Pat. 100,000 years ago, the human population shrank to about 10,000 people. And we're descended from those 10,000 people. The reason was a virus, they reckon, wiped out like 1 million people would have been the population. Most of them were wiped out because they couldn't handle the virus, So Ebola's on its way. Exactly. And we know that the ones who survived had a different protein called a siglic. It's a great technical name. And the virus couldn't get into the cells anymore. And those people survived, and we're descended from them. So again, we're lucky to be here for that reason too.
Now, of course, we are a sophisticated people. So presumably we would be working and are working on things to stop those rogue viruses from doing away with so many of us, but who knows what other things are afoot. Yep. So these various extinctions, the most famous, I suppose, because it's one that we can all identify with, is the death of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, that was happened 66 million years ago, so not today or yesterday, but around about that time, suddenly dinosaurs disappear from the fossil record because their bones are all in the fossils, obviously, and then eventually they disappear, and it's almost overnight, not quite, but over the course of maybe
in those kind of terms,
in those kinds of
geological time, overnight.
Exactly. And the question was why, and various theories came up as to it could have been a virus. Did they start smoking? Was Gary Larson's famous cartoon, dinosaurs smoking. But it turned out to be an asteroid. Very good evidence. Massive asteroid, probably near Mexico, slammed into the Earth, threw up all this dust, which created a nuclear winter equivalent, I guess. All that dust stopped the sunlight. And these dinosaurs needed plants. And of course, many plants just died out, and these dinosaurs had no more food to live on, and the extinctions begin. Tiny mammals survived, by the way, that we're descended from, And if the dinosaurs hadn't become extinct, we wouldn't be here because,
they would have
eaten us and they would have dominated.
Actually, they've known herbivores. We would have been okay.
That's true.
But they certainly would have trod on us.
They would, and there were carnivores as well, preying on the herbivores, remember, like Tyrannosaurus rex and so on. So that's a really good one. We know that because there's a layer of iridium, Pat, interestingly, in the Earth that was released from this asteroid at that time. Yeah. All over the Earth, this dust settles from the asteroid containing iridium, and that's in an asteroid, and that's how we know the evidence is very strong then. It was an asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs.
So they left, and you have to wonder what the world would have been like if the dinosaurs had bred like humans are breeding, for example, because they're big creatures and they devour a lot. Would they eventually have eaten themselves into extinction?
They might, yeah. That's interesting what the Earth would be like. We wouldn't be here for definite, though, if the dinosaurs had persisted. And interestingly, another big one was 440 million years ago when 85% of life died out. At that time, life was very diverse on Earth. There were all these different body plans, different types of creatures. Many of them became extinct. We're descended from one of those creatures. There was even a weird worm at that time, Pat, with legs, right? Yeah. And that died out in that time as well. And that, there was no lineage from that then, I suppose.
Now, how do we know all this?
The fossil record's very important, and there's massive detail on fossils. And you can date rocks very precisely and find how old they are and find the bones in the rocks. And some of the fossils are microscopic. You can use microscopes to look at them and so on. And you can then time, I guess, life on Earth through fossils is the compelling evidence for all this.
Now, of course, these are, as we talk in geological time, in real time, our time, a lot of these things would have happened over a relatively long period. So you could be looking at today and fast forward a couple of million years and they look back to the 20th century AD, and they may see that in geological terms as what we are doing to our planet as being in the blink of an eye.
That's right. I mean, a really good one, Pat, is there was a thing called the Great Irish Elk. Did you ever hear of that creature?
Yeah.
They became extinct about 12,000 years ago, right? And again, it must have been humans hunting them in Ireland because they're found in the bogs of Ireland. They've got massive antlers. Of course, strangely, they aren't great. They're not Irish, not an elk. They were misnamed because they weren't just in Ireland. They were a type of deer. They aren't even an elk. But they became extinct quite quickly, And they reckon it was probably hunting by humans was one reason. Slight climate change. They needed very big antlers, you see, and then they needed all these minerals to be in their diet, and the plant life began to change, and they couldn't grow the antlers anymore, and that became a reason for them to become extinct. So these extinctions can happen very quickly, especially if it's human driven, clearly then. And in fact, since 1500, 320 big species have become extinct.
Big species.
Now, we're mainly talking about what I call megafauna. It's the big animals that are under threat here, like tigers and lions and these sorts of creatures.
And why is that? Why are the big fun? Because you think a tiger can protect itself pretty much from everyone except man.
Yeah, they're very vulnerable, strangely. I mean, they're vulnerable for a few reasons. They don't breed much, these big creatures. I mean,
they have one cub at a time kind of thing.
The panda, famous about. Pandas live solitary lives, and a male and female might meet only once a year, right?
Yeah.
And if the female panda isn't ready, there's not going to be any action, and there's no baby pandas, and that year goes by. So the replacement
chances of them ever kind of lasting are very slim.
They're a mystery why they've lasted at all, in fact.
What species particularly are most resilient? Now, don't mention the cockroach because, can survive nuclear war and all the rest of it. It can be there in the Arctic or in the humidity and heat of New York City.
Yeah, well, the future will be bacteria, Pat, by the way, probably, because bacteria were the first life to evolve. They live in oceans. They can live anywhere. They can live at the bottom of swamps. They can live without oxygen, all these things. They can live in every single habitat imaginable, So, and up to about 2 billion years ago, all life was microscopic on Earth. So if we went back in time in a time machine, back to about 2 billion years, you need a microscope to see any life at all on Earth, and that's bacterial mainly, so they're very resilient, so life will continue. So no matter what
we did to ourselves, nuclear holocaust or global warming, whatever, and we wipe ourselves out, eventually life would come back because the little bacterium is working his way through whatever lunch he can find.
Exactly, and if we're lucky, the movie might play itself again, Pat, and that bacteria will begin to evolve into
Planet
us.
of the Apes.
That's right, eventually will evolve back into us again, maybe. The type will rerun, I suppose.
Now, what should we do? I mean, are there any species that we should say we will set out to protect? The elephant, the rhino being killed for rhino horn, which is crazy because it's only, keratin or something like that. It's nothing important. I mean, what should we do?
Well, again, all this conservation, the World Wildlife Fund, remember, Pat, famously was established in the 50s to try and protect these creatures. Now, it hasn't worked, sadly, because many of them, the numbers are tiny. Some of these surviving species are very small numbers, So conservation is one thing. You've got to watch their environment and protect their habitat and not encroach on it too much. And again, that's quite complicated as well, So minding their habitat, conservation, and then putting them into reserves and zoos effectively, I suppose, and letting them breed. Pandas are surviving in zoos, basically, and then they won't live in the wild anymore, and they'll be there for us to look at, I suppose, in these environments. The other option is to take their DNA, by the way, a bit like Jurassic Park, and you could. The one thing that in Australia, the Tasmanian devil became extinct. It's a marsupial. They've got DNA from that, and they're trying hard now to put that DNA into another marsupial that'd be related and might give birth to another Tasmanian devil.
So we could bring back the Irish elk if we could find some DNA.
We could, and they're storing all these DNA samples all over, in various parts of the world to make sure that we have a repository of DNA should one become extinct, and we might be able to reawaken them, in the future, I guess. But none of this is ideal. I mean, the best option is to maintain them and preserve their environment.
Well, Dr. Frankenstein, Luke, if there was some species you could bring back, what would you bring back?
That's a good question. I would bring, why not the great Irish elk? Wouldn't it be wonderful? It's iconic for Ireland anyway, and you see them in the museums, and they were magnificent creatures, and there were tens of thousands of them roaming Ireland, all those years ago, and quite happy with themselves, and they were beautiful creatures. So we'd love to bring one of them back, I guess.
I suppose we'd have to have two anyway.
We'd need a mate and then convince them to procreate.
All right. Luke O'Neill, thank you very much for joining us. Luke is Professor of Biochemistry and Director of the Trinity Biomedical Sciences Institute at that college.